But the Lord said to Samuel, "Do not look on his appearance or on his height or his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord does not see as mortals see. They look on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." You've heard me talk before about winning hearts and minds. If you win the hearts and minds of your people, they'll follow you anywhere and do anything for you. So we're about to embark on chapter 6 of Warriors, Heart Chargers, and Patriots, connecting little dots to big dots. And specifically, we're going to talk about tribal leadership. What happens when ordinary people confront a variety of different challenges and giants in terms of their stature and their ability to do ill will to you or with you? What happens when ordinary people are focused on outsized challenges? That's when the ordinary people find out that they're not so ordinary and that they become the Davids that slay the Goliaths and take on the Goliaths and they win. The act of facing overwhelming odds, which we're going to talk about as we go from stage 1 in the tribal leadership story to stage 5. When they face these insurmountable difficulties, they truly find their greatness. And we've talked about the greatness piece of this before. And I think it's so critical to what we're about in terms of helping people realize that they can do anything and they can overcome anything. From a tribe perspective, the central thesis is based around this idea of covenantry, formal contracts and informal contracts and agreements. And the informal contracts, of course, from a military perspective, would be the oath and other such things where there's formal expectations of getting a certain job done. And the informals are those pieces where you get to know each other's jobs, get to rely on, or get to understand what people need from you and what you need from other people. And there's those informal agreements where you're not going to let each other down because, indeed, you're shipmates. So we talked about, we just basically very loosely touched about the power of our presence. And I want to get into that a little bit and talk about one specific instance that'll take us through the various stages because I think it's pretty important. When I took over INCHON, USS INCHON in 1994, October of 1994. And we were told that we were going to be going to a shipyard for an 18-month availability for a major overhaul, and they were going to reconfigure the ship from an LPH, which is a landing platform helicopter, amphibious ship, if you will, to a mine warfare command and control ship. And we were informed that we were going to know where we were going to go to in the coming weeks. This was October. They wanted us somewhere in February. Now, there was a shipyard that had availability in Norfolk and one down in Mississippi. Now, we were home ported in Norfolk. We had 800 crew members. We had a good number of families, maybe I would say 600 families for the 800 sailors. Some spouses, a lot of children, a lot of people that were working at various jobs, and of course the kids were in school. And so, and we just sort of presumed, nobody told us to expect one way or the other, but there was availability there and they had experience working on these types of ships. So we thought this would be the natural conclusion. Well, the day before Thanksgiving break, we were informed otherwise, and we were informed that we were going to be heading to Pascagoula, Mississippi, and we had to be down there in February. And we also were doing a permanent change of station, which doesn't mean much to people that aren't in the military, but to what it meant for us is that we had to uproot our families and everybody with us, or we were going to, because there was no temporary duty monies to be available. So families had to make a choice. They were either going to stay where they were, or they were going to have some unbelievable separations from their loved ones that were heading down to Mississippi with us. The perception, and we didn't know why. So the balloons, the air was just sucked out of the balloon, and we were reeling with trying to figure out what the heck was going to go on, how are we going to get this done. So we had to figure out, number one, and listen to people. We got a lot of listening communities together, talked to a lot of family members. I lost the families immediately. They were just fried. They were pissed off, and rightfully so. So several of us, the XO and I, and the command senior chief, went up to Washington, D.C. to try to figure out why. We needed to have a why to this. and we couldn't figure out what it was, or where we were gonna, or what could possibly have made them do this. We had some ideas and some thoughts, but they were just rumors, and we didn't want to deal in rumors. We left there without having an answer. We literally got sort of kicked out of the Pentagon, or at least politely asked to go home and deal with the challenges that we had. There were so many forcing functions that we got into this stage one of the book that Dave Logan wrote on called Tribal Leadership. And I'm using it sort of as a central thesis to walk us through these. It's an excellent book if you haven't read it. And stage one of tribal leadership, or of the tribe, stages of the tribe, is life sucks. And life sucks and for us on a 24/7 basis, because we had no idea where we were going to go or how we were going to get this done. There was no real positive thing whatsoever coming out of this. We were trying to figure out, what we were going to do in terms of getting our families, to keep the continuity there, and work about our schools, because we were going to be in a shipyard for 18 months. Availability funding got cut by 20%, which sort of put us, again, spun us around, because we thought, well, do they want us to succeed or not? And as far as I was concerned, they picked the wrong crew if they didn't want us to succeed. So we just couldn't figure out what was going on. But that's really all we needed. So then we decided we needed to go out, and we had to figure out what we were going to do to get out of that stage one type of environment. And we did what all tribes do. We go out to our outer tribes, and we try to find out who can help us and who wants to help this crew, so that we don't lose the crew and we can get out of stage one. And we went to universities, and we went to other ships to see if, in fact, they could help us with, getting sailors their sea qualifications and keeping them competitive for ratings. We went to an organization called NALO. I honestly can't tell you what it means, but it was a squadron that was, at the time, they've changed, but they were in charge of all of the Navy's DC-9s and other transport aircraft around the world. Moving people and cargo to various places, and they had a headquarters in New Orleans, Louisiana. And they gave us a call one day saying, we heard about your challenge. We had sent them a note asking if they would sit and meet with us, and so they invited us over. And we walked out of there with a pledge from them that we would have at least one DC-9 every Thursday night meet us in Keesler Air Force Base, which is close to where we were at, and we would transport at least roughly 150 people home from Sunday night or Thursday night to Sunday night, so they could spend that time with their family. So that began to turn things around. That was a big deal. And by the way, we had gotten extended for 6 months, so that sort of kept us in that life sucks environment for a little while, but the NALO crew gave us at least one, sometimes two, aircraft every week for 2 years running. We didn't miss a weekend. So that was tough, and they made it a lot easier for us. So we got people that we got into college. We had people that moved to other ships to be able to keep their training. We cross-decked as many people as we could so they could stay out and do what they had to do. We had 40% of our crew enrolled in different universities or things like that. So we began to transition to stage two. We began to see that at least we were trying. We were trying to make a difference, and that we believed in the crew. We needed the crew to stay whole and just work with us and trust us. This trust word was so important. And in Mr. Logan's book, he indicates that roughly, based on his data, that 28% of the companies are stage two companies. And what stage two says is, my life sucks, which sort of intimates that others don't. And in fact, it's a bad place to have a division or an organization, because people in that organization are seeing all kinds of good things happening around them, and they're not part of that. And so you're listening and paying attention and talking to your people, asking the right kinds of questions about how things are going, comparing them to what you're hearing in other places, help you guide leadership at all levels to sort of mimic some of the other good things that are happening in some of the other divisions or organizations. Because it doesn't matter if you have some other people that are doing great over here. if you got people that are saying that my life sucks. So that was stage two, and we kept working to get those things transitioning from having anybody that had my life sucks. And how did we do that? Well, the stage three is I'm great, and then in parents you're not, which is a recognition that people had they had this feeling that that they were doing really well, and then they looked around and saw some of their shipmates who weren't doing so well. And the natural conclusion should be, hey, you have to help them, right? And one of the things that I found out early on was this concept of self-talk and how much of a role it played in between these two stages, between my life sucks, inferring that others aren't, and I'm great and you're not, right? So the self-talk thing, right? And self-talk is so critical. It was one of these things that was reinforced numerous times through the rest of my Navy career. Let's take an example. I coached a Little League baseball team in Jacksonville, Florida. I wasn't very good. I wasn't any good at it. The reason I had the job is because I volunteered and nobody else volunteered. And we lost a lot of games. And we would sit in the dugout before the game, and I'd hear some of my players mumbling among themselves, we're going to get killed. These guys are so much better than we are. We're just going to lose so bad. And it was self-fulfilling. We did lose so bad, and we did lose those games. And you could hear people in the other dugout saying, "Oh, we got this. Yeah, we're going to win this game. We've got our act together." They were high-fiving themselves before the game even got going. So the self-talk thing was something that I wanted to make sure that we always kept the repetitive actions. Here's what we got done today. Remember, here's what we're going to do when we get this ship done. And keeping in touch with the people going to schools and making sure that other people are getting into schools, keeping in touch with the families back home, so that the self-talk was, hey, listen, we're all in this together. And we're getting people home as quickly and as often as it can. I'm going to take a pause here for a moment, and on a personal note, for the 24 months, I made it home 11 times. Now, it almost destroyed my family, but it didn't, because I had a wonderful wife and wonderful children, but more importantly, the self-talk between us and the self-talk between our children, and making them understand why I had to go do what I had to go do, and that it wasn't anything personal. I wasn't doing this because I didn't want to be home, but I honestly felt I had to be there as often as I could to have these conversations with the sailors and the chiefs and the other officers, and work through all the various problems that occurred. And I honestly believe, and my XO was the same way, and I honestly believe if we hadn't been there and been the glue and been there to have good discussions, just sitting in the common areas late on a Friday night when people came back from a bar, from happy hour, we could have had some real problems. So then we're working our way towards the 18-month mark. Now, the other challenge I had were, we did some things just to try to keep people out of trouble. New Orleans was 100 miles away. We had various gambling facilities within 25 miles of us, and lots of different bars down there. And I had to make sure that these men and women we only had men at the time, were alive every morning. That was my first goal. And so we would go for a run every morning, forced run. Boy, I had people hate me. I still get hate mail over it, actually, which is, it's been about 6 months since I got any hate mail. Pretty bad hate mail. But I didn't do it because I wanted to be a jerk, or I wanted to show them I was powerful. It wasn't a power thing. It was a compassionate thing. I wanted to make sure that I never had to write a letter or call a parent or another significant other and say, hey, your son's in a hospital. He was in an accident last night after maybe having too many beers, or after staying out all night and fall asleep at the wheel, whatever. It doesn't matter. So I accepted that as not a cross, but as my responsibility to take that on, because I wanted everyone to get out of phase 3 and get on to phase 2. So the 18-month mark, we started to get things together. Remember the story of the 15s, the middle 15s. on the middle 15s where we lose sight of anything that's going on. And that was also making life difficult between getting from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3, because, we really, we were in the middle of trying to write a new operating environment document and requirements capability document. And so we were trying to make that so that we could present it to the crew and they understood what we were going to go do. But it was really important that we also understood that we got them back onto why the ship was so important. So that we had that middle 15s things going on for a while where we sort of lost touch with what we were about. And some people did. Some of us worked really hard not to have that happen. And when we got to the 18-month mark, we began to get into that final 15s area where we could see the finish line. And we gauged our effort and our energy accordingly. And stage 4 is we're great. Just stops there. We're great. And we began to feel that way. We were slowly migrating there. The culture reemerged. The honors, courage, and commitment had another reinforced meaning in terms of what we were about to do with this newly christened ship, if you will, because she had a whole new mission and a whole bunch of new different equipment. We went through sea trials. The sea trials were successful. We had the crew back intact, and we were going to be moving the ship to Corpus Christi, Texas, which was where her initial final home port was. And we could also worry about who the bad guys really were, and none of the bad guys were any of us on the ship. They weren't the bad guys weren't in the Pentagon. It was not what we were all about. There is a stage 5, by the way, and that's life is great. And that's about 2% of the companies overall. We had moments of life is great. It's difficult in almost any company, I would say, or certainly on Navy ships, because we have such a turnover of crew, and there's so many other forcing functions out there that can knock you off of that mountain, if you will. It's sort of like trying to balance a marble on an inverted bowl. But it's something you should always attain to go after, and it was something that we talked about a lot in our dialogue. We used emotional leadership, emotional dialogue, and we were trying to be compellingly emotional about why our jobs were important and how much their effort meant for us getting this ship out of the way, out to sea. Because we found that if we drove the ship or the crew emotionally, that they brought out the best in everyone else. And we it was something we tried. We tried this emotional leadership thing all the way through, but we had to almost get to a certain place where there were no more leaks coming out of the bucket before it really had a difference. And it was really about the beginning of level 3, level 4 for sure, where we got there. Leadership is certainly the key to everything. We would have never gotten there without leadership at all levels. And where I saw missionary zeal under the most trying of conditions, I knew leadership was deploying the big dot dialogue. I could correlate those things with something I was looking for. When I saw pride, sincerity, and cooperation, I knew the one team, one fight culture had taken root. We could tell where people were inspired and where they were not. When I saw an attitude of constructive dissent and an emphasis on creativity and innovation, I knew that hard chargers and warriors were not letting the reality that we had every day, prevent them from doing delivering this one-of-a-kind ship back to the Navy. This was so important. Constructive discontent was okay. It helps us understand, because it's not only complaining about an issue or a challenge, but it's also coming out and talking about how we're going to fix it together. Never leave a problem without having a solution that we can, legitimately go after. And then, the last one was I saw all these high expectations and these celebrations of where we did different things. It could have been a promotion ceremony. It could have been making a piece of equipment work. It could have been a sea trial. But I knew that leadership got back to the oath, and they got back to the persistence piece of warriorship, and they reminded everyone that their promise to each other really mattered. But it was a heck of a long journey. And I'm not even sure today. You know, I talked to people from the ship, my old XO, several other sailors that we've talked to recently, and they just did. This was probably the toughest job in terms of keeping a crew together. More importantly, keeping their families in whole. And I will never forget this. I recommend the book to give you a guide and a measure as to how your various divisions and organizations are coming together, and look for those that aren't, you know, doing so well. Try to figure out what it is that you can make happen so that everyone is working towards that life is great 2%. I mean, even if you don't get there, it's an aspiration you should shoot for. And finally, from a personal note, I want to say this one almost busted me. I mean, I had written a letter of resignation following this, and I had an admiral who spent some good hours talking to me about this, because I felt like I was gonna lose my family over this. And while I love my sailors, I love my family more. It was tough, and I'm so glad. And this will come up in a different discussion. I'll go into the specifics of what this letter of it was basically telling me the people that I wanted to resign. This letter of resignation, and what he and I talked about to convince me that I had more work to do, and that maybe I could have even done things better here. And that was a constructive comment, and I appreciate it very much. And I used that letter of resignation actually as a leadership tool, both on George Washington and Carl Vinson, and I think you'll find that entertaining. I'm so proud of these young men and women who many of you never ever knew there was a USS INCHON, but can you imagine 2 years without being with your family, for the most part? I hope that people in Washington, D.C. always remind themselves that when they make these decisions, that they always, they have to be worthwhile. We had to presume they were worthwhile decisions, and it was the only way they could go. And otherwise, we would have destroyed ourselves and would have never gotten out of phase one. But the power of our tribe, baby, is so good, so powerful. And I'm sitting here with my tribe here tonight, and just relaxing a little bit, and I hope you all are too. Love you guys. We're going to get on to bigger and better things and happier things, but not everything's good, not everything's great, but it's that resilience and that drive of young men and women who can overcome anything. They're the Davids that can take on any Goliath. You just have to win their hearts and minds, and you have to emotionally compel them to do the hardest things when they need to be done. Love you all. Have a great night. Talk to you soon.